welcome to Turn the Page, the official podcast of the Syosset Public Library.
Hello, everyone. Welcome back to Turn the Page. I'm your host today, Jen, and today I am here with the creator of an absolutely beautiful and fascinating graphic novel. It's really took my breath away, and I am so excited to talk about it because there's a lot of ideas in a very succinct package that is just so interesting. So welcome. Could I ask you to introduce yourself and your book, please?
Of course. Thank you so much for that lovely pre-introduction. So nice. Yeah, so I'm Jared Sarnie. I am the author and illustrator of The Machine is Broken, which is my debut graphic novel, which is going to be released by Field Mouse Press on August 26th. Pre-orders are available now. Got to give that plug. And just to give the basic elevator pitch for the book, The Machine is Broken follows a young woman named Lux who travels to Zurich with her mom and her sister, although her sister was never officially invited. And the three of them are going on this journey so that they can use, or well, that Lux can use the world's very first self-serve, fully automated euthanasia device. And she gets in the device, she waves goodbye to her family, it all starts to fade to black, and then the machine breaks and the story goes from there. Um, yeah, so that's the little pitch. I will say at the top here that just we're on video here. You're recording from a library. I am outside of my comic life a young adult librarian, so I feel like I am hot between my artist persona and my library persona. I'm like 50% in like patron interaction mode right now, a little bit. So if there's anything you need help finding, happy to help. Yeah.
That is so interesting. Yeah, I did not know that you were also a librarian. That's so cool. I think that libraries and comics go together really well these days. There's been I think, an increased presence of comics in libraries for all ages. And yeah, it's a good time to be in both things, I think.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I as a young person who just like constantly went to the library, like when I was like a little kid, like that was my introduction to comics. And I feel like I'm a young adult librarian. My comic is very much an adult book, so the youngins don't read it. No. But I think kind of the introduction of comics into libraries was mostly focused on middle grade books, and in large part, that's still the case. It's just like a hugely dominant part of the market. But for me as a young person and just as a user of libraries, all the like kind of scary big adult stuff was just mixed in with the superhero stuff because it hadn't been separately cataloged like 10 years ago. So not only were like comics something I fell in love with as a young person through the library, it was also kind of my first introduction to adult and more serious literature more broadly, basically due to a cataloging error. So yeah.
That's really cool. Wow. So what was the inception point for this comic? Was it like a bit of, I don't know, a bit of news you read? Was it a particular character that you envisioned, the color scheme? Where did it all begin?
Yeah, it definitely came from real life. Well, I think like the core premise of the book of this euthanasia pod that is in Zurich is directly pulled from real life, which is interesting because it's kind of the most almost sci-fi aspect of the book. But what I depict in The Machine is Broken is a fictionalized version of this device called the sarcopod, which is exactly what is in the book. It's part of this larger group of what they frame themselves as like right to die activists that kind of are pushing the envelope on what is acceptable within euthanasia. And this is a 3D printed, extremely science fiction, alien looking concept that they put together with the intention of completely democratizing suicide, that anybody could make it at home without governmental or medical oversight, which is kind of crazy. That idea just really stuck with me as just like a subject that I feel like is extremely challenging because, I have very mixed feelings on the subject of medically assisted euthanasia. The book is not like this glowing endorsement. It's not this sharp critique either. I think most of us, within American medical concept have, speaking extremely broadly on something that has a million different perspectives, but I think there is a broad understanding of like hospice care has qualities that do border on euthanasia in terms of making somebody comfortable and, providing them with morphine and essentially making their process of their natural death perhaps in some ways accelerated, but more, humane and comfortable. I think people have an understanding of that. And then you get into the place of euthanasia for people with terminal illness, and that's like slightly more thorny in these questions of quality of life versus medical autonomy. And then you get to this place, and this is a conversation in the UK now of euthanasia being offered for people with mental illnesses, and then again the questions of like medical consent and like again just autonomy just become very very gray and very very challenging. And when I am approached with something that's super super gray and super super challenging that I don't have a clear answer on, I'm like, it's a great place to explore this art where you don't need clear answers. So that's my large little spiel about the kind of real world inspiration that kind of synthesized into this book.
Yeah. Yeah, you managed to walk a really fine line, I think, with it, as you sort of like think and feel your way through this like very thorny issue. It's it's at times flippant and very funny and absurdist, but it is also, I think, respectful and reverent in some ways and treats it like a serious issue. And there's like a lot of that sort of what I like to think of as like the sort of existentialist nihilist prism, like when you shift
Yeah.
slightly, one becomes the other. How did you decide on your tone and how you were going to approach?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I feel like slightly a bit at odds in how I like this is my very first book, so like this is my first time kind of talking about my art in like a public forum. So like as an individual like dealing with the topic of like suicide, that's obviously something that I want to treat with like the utmost respect and utmost sensitivity because it's perhaps like the most sensitive subject. At the same time, as an artist, like in the art that inspires me and what I think like the function of art is in society, just to give the most pretentious as possible answer, like it is to push boundaries and to be flippant and to be insensitive and to be disrespectful. Like I like not on this subject matter, but I think like of art, like if I think John Waters or something like where it's like deliberately like the point is to offend, and not necessarily coming from a place of like now I think like offense and like hatefulness are very much tied together. Like that's not where the place is I'm coming from, but to like, disrupt sensibilities so that you can explore subjects in a place that's, it's within art, it's safe. So I think my tonal approach to the book was to, care about my characters, care about the subject matter, not like just be this like edgy nihilist, but be deliberately insensitive with a deeply sensitive subject matter. And part of that is like a bit of a rebellion of like what I like to think of as like kind of the Ted Lassoification of you know the interiority of characters, where subjects that deal with like complex, messy, gray, or existential, or I guess you could say like spiritual struggle or psychological struggle, like so many of these internal struggles of characters that are so essential to drama have like now been put under this big umbrella of like mental health. And within like a framework of health, there's like becomes this a very to use a bit of a health pun, a prescriptive approach to dealing with these subjects, where just by talking about suicidal ideation, suddenly you as an artist are in like a position as an advocate, or you're like kind of having to write like some like adult version of Bluey where there's like a clear like moral, like which is again, I don't know, I'm coming for Ted Lasso, so it's a totally fine show. I hate it, but it's totally fine. Where it's like, because we're talking about a sensitive issue or a quote unquote important subject, you have to be this important advocate who treats everything. And I'm just like, no, like that's not what the role of an artist is, and that's not what the experience of mental illness is. It's not clean, and it's not saying the right thing, and it's not having everything be perfect. And when you're going through something with mental health, and I hate even to call it, again, I like railing against the term mental health and within art and then using it, but like when you're going through a tough time, things don't get magically sectioned off where suddenly all the silliness of life and all the offensiveness of life and all the saying the wrong thing disappears and everything is very serious and very confined and very saying all the right thing. It's the opposite. Like when you're dealing with I mean, anyone who's ever been to a hospital knows that like those situations are just as horribly stressful as they are also ridiculous. Something ridiculous always happens. And yeah, that's my little anti-Ted Lasso polemic that maybe answers that question.
Yeah, I think, that's a really good point, I think, about how asterisk mental health is treated in entertainment. It often does get treated as this sort of like, if you're going to depict it, you should depict it in these approved ways that, suggest sensitivity and all of these things. But you're absolutely right that the absurdity of life doesn't go away. And in fact, it is sometimes highlighted because when you feel really bad, I think
Yeah.
those absurd things can be welcome sometimes, I think. Yeah, so on that note, could you talk a little bit about Lux and maybe like what sort of things in the zeitgeist you were responding to with her character?
Yeah, I think in many ways like the book as a whole with it being pulling from, a contemporary news subject as its core premise and with a lot of the like kind of like modern kind of culture war issues it kind of like lightly lampoons throughout is definitely like a little bit like zeitgeisty, quote unquote, and consciously so. And then with Lux as a character, like I tried to kind of, I mean, he's a very personal character to me, and I guess like it was more like trying to place like the juxtaposition of like her exterior world feels very absurd and like she's a McDonald's plays like a big part in the book, but it's corporate sponsorships and it's snake oil salesmen and it's inane conversations like constantly surrounding her in this like kind of media environment where there's just like a billboard like everywhere you look, which very much like visually is represented in the style of the book of just kind of this explosion of different styles. And then yeah, like Lux as a character in their internal monologue is just kind of very much representative of like my own feelings of like trying to maintain like a quiet if frustrated interiority in like just like a endlessly like neon lights world. And a big part of the aspect of like travel in the book is that as much as she's traveling to undergo this like medical procedure and to get access to medical care that is not available in America, like it is this broader idea of like trying to find somewhere where like the person who you are is reflected outside of you and not feeling at home in your own world and making this big journey. And, that journey doesn't necessarily have to be travel. It could be a person's new job, a new partner, a new stage in life, and then you get there and you just find yourself confronted with all the same bullshit, basically. I don't know if we can swear on this.
Yeah.
Yes, for the edit. BC, bull crud. Yeah.
That is really interesting because there is a kind of layering of like levels of sort of derealization or displacement that Lux is feeling out of place in your life, in your family, in your society, in the world, because she is in Europe, as you said, and as an American, which can feel very absurd sometimes. And that removal from the American context does bring up some really interesting questions that you've hinted at about American healthcare, about like, would this service that you can only really access in Europe right now, what would it mean if we actually had a functioning healthcare system? Like would it be
Yeah.
so appealing or Mhm.
Yeah, no, I'm just going, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Um, yeah, and I do think like especially like, not having socialized healthcare in America and people downstream of that not usually having a good relationship with their doctors and having a broadly adversarial relationship every time you go into like a doctor's office. It's like you go into an urgent care because you can't see your primary care and they're like seem confused as to why you'd even be there. They're like, "What? Like you want health care? Like what?" Like and then you eventually get in the room and it's like you're not sure who exactly you're talking to and you talk to them for 10 seconds and then you like leave and you're like just totally like lost. Like it's I think it's a deeply like frustrating and kind of inhumane experience the way we've set it up in like how many people would feel the need that like their only option is to end it if they were given other pathways to care. And then with the difference between like American and European healthcare, like we obviously, and I think especially like anybody who's like advocating for like Medicare for all, like always like uses the like refrain and like myself included in this of like that's like we're like the richest country in the world and we're the only like country in the Western world that does not offer socialized healthcare. And that's super true, and we like need that. But at the same time, does that mean that these countries that do have socialized healthcare are not also struggling with these same issues of privatization and just like the constant corporate overreach that led us to where we are in America? And in many ways, that is like the little tendrils of America just being so completely endemic in terms of just like the power of American capital and like American soft power in terms of our cultural reach. So like a huge like kind of part of my approach to the book is like yes, Lux travels to Zurich, and then they're in this this liberal metropolitan haven, but they really only interact with American culture once they're there. She's still completely within an American context. Like there's a kind of a brief like cameo appearance, I guess I'll say, of like like an anti-vax alternative health, like to put it in nice terms, I guess, movement within there. And like the anti-vax movement in America is completely homegrown from a context of people not getting care and seeking these completely, baseless and harmful alternate, I'm putting air quotes, solutions. Like that is not borne out in places that have socialized medicine because there's not this deep distrust of medicine. That being said, we've now managed, just in the same way that we export all of our films and our music and our fast food joints, the anti-vax movement has been exported all across the world and they get it from American social media and now it's like everywhere. Um, and yeah, part of that speaks to like the cultural power of America. Part of that speaks to the problems that we have here pop up everywhere. Another massive long ramble of a tangent, but that might just be my style. A very succinct book, but not very succinct
Yeah.
answers.
Well, it asks a lot of big questions that, as you say, don't have easy answers. And it gives you, I think, to use the phrase that my therapist once used pretty frequently, like if we are to see emotions as information, as neither good or bad inherently. The experience of reading something like this that is like very deals with charged issues, with intense, vulnerable emotions and like difficult character journeys. Like if it's really interesting to look at something like this and just see what feelings it brings up to you and what that might mean to you?
Yeah, and definitely I like right now I'm kind of getting on my soapbox a little bit, but like within the book, like I didn't want to be at all preachy or have like I just wanted to express things that I knew were extremely emotionally potent to me and not necessarily know like quote unquote what they like mean, because like I know like if this is something I'm drawn to and something that affects me and something that challenges me and something that confuses me, like I gotta trust like the strength of those feelings and just put that out and trust that other people will have those same deeper reactions to it without saying this is how you should feel. It's good that the character is killing themselves. It's bad. It's this, it's that. Like it's definitely yeah, I totally agree with the framing of what you're saying. I'm trying and I kind of challenge myself to be like a little bit ambiguous with a lot
Mm.
of it. A little bit ambiguous with there's some a little a lot in there somewhere. I don't know. Yeah.
So, oh, my last question actually is about your color choices. I'm always really interested in what guides color choices for comics artists. It's really beautiful and evocative, but you do play with like a limited palette at times. So, what were you thinking?
Yeah, the color definitely came from a few different places. I think like what one of the like most present colors in the book is like this like pink, and I don't even know how to necessarily describe this pink other than that it's like a very Sofia Coppola pink. And Sofia Coppola was just a huge influence on the book, obviously with the Virgin Suicides having some very similar subject matter, and many of the character names of the book are pulled from the Virgin Suicides directly. They have Lux Libsyn, we have Lux Leibowitz because their character is, you know, Southern Gothic Christian and mine is very, very Jewish. So there had to be a little bit of a shift there. So that was definitely a huge influence. And then and Sophia Coppola has this great like archive book, which is just this huge, which maybe you can get at your local library. I don't know, a little library plug. It's just a huge retrospective of all their work, and it has this beautiful pink on the cover that they've used across all their work. And I fully was like, I'm so inspired by that pink, basically. Which like and specifically like because like I think in Sofia Coppola's film work, like obviously like that those pinkish hues are meant to represent like femininity, which is, you know, definitely a theme in this book, and like also like the within the Virgin Suicide specifically comparing the book to the film. Like the book is written by a man and it is framed as the collective voice of a series of boys in this town staring at it's all written as like a we of their perception of the Libsyn sisters who are the protagonists of the book. But the whole book is about boys looking at girls becoming women and just being completely confused and idiotic and not understanding them like growing into this thing that's much deeper and more mature than they ever could have. And then the film is very much about the interiority of those characters, and in many ways them having to grapple with the perception of these boys literally like staring at them with binoculars. So there's just a really interesting interplay, and I'm getting so far away from colors there. That I definitely tried to continue in the book. And I think to loop it back to color, in the Virgin Suicides, the book, and throughout Sofia Coppola's work, there's often this warm, pink, hazy quality that just speaks to this feeling of ambiguity and some type of like vague surrealness, can't say it, surreality, too tricky. um so that is those are all my thoughts in the pink. And then if you have pink, what else should you probably have? Blue. We're doing some basic gender symbolism. And then if you have pink and blue, what else do you need to, you gotta have purple. So that's kind of the origins of my thoughts on the pink. And then a lot of the limited color palette does have to do with the ideas of gender that are expressed in the book, and the ideas of maybe some little bit of gender bending that maybe happens in the book that I can't even really explain further without spoilers. But that's why you gotta buy the book, listeners at home, or get it from your local library.
Yes, either of those are such good options, and I do highly recommend it because it is such a gorgeous read. You are so right that that Coppola Pink really does a very good job just sort of through her constant use of evoking like a sort of like melancholy interior dreaminess, that's sort of like
Yes, yeah.
half despair, half absurdity.
Yeah. So that's exactly who I'm ripping off. Yeah.
Oh, well, what is next for you? Do you have another graphic novel in your future, do you think?
Yes, I don't want to say specifically what I'm working on right now, but I am working on something. You know what? I can give the title of what I'm working on. This is an exclusive. I've never uttered this out loud because this title is completely unrelated almost, except if you're me and you know how it deeply relates to the subject matter of the book Evan works. So, next graphic novel you'll see it in probably a million years because it takes so long to draw these things is titled The Man Who Killed Elliot Smith. So, keep an eye out for that.
Wow. Yeah,
Mystery.
intriguing.
Ooh,
Intriguing
spooky.
title. Yes. Well, I look forward to that. No rush. You need to physically recover from a graphic novel as well as
Yes, yeah.
emotionally. So, but thank you for taking the time to talk to us and our show. I'm so excited to recommend this to people.
Yeah, no, thank you so much for having me. I really, really appreciate it. And go libraries. Everybody support your local library. Join your friend's organization. Vote yes when they're in budgetary crisis. I don't know if you guys are dealing with that, but a lot of us are. So
Yay,
yeah.
yes. Oh, all
Yeah.
good advice. Oh, thank you again. And thank you, listeners. It is now time to close this chapter. We'll see you next time.
It's time to close this chapter of Turn the Page. Join us for the next episode.